when you script it, it's like, maybe that's not that funny. You know what I mean? Like, we just kind of splurt stupid shit out, and so it's fine.
Yeah, and you live with it.
But when we're sitting here and be like, hey, I'm going to splurt this stupid shit out, it's like, whoa, maybe we don't. That's stupid shit.
I have come on a mission of gravest consequence. For I am the Watcher, member of an ancient race far older than man. But though our power is great, we are pledged only to watch, never to interfere. But now mankind faces the greatest danger it has ever known. The danger of
the Watchers of Earth. 199,999.
Welcome to the Watchers of Earth 199,999. I am your host, Andrew, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Seth.
Mm-hmm.
Our third co-host, Joe, couldn't be here today because he was attending a science explanation at a nut house.
Mm-hmm.
You say nut house?
I don't think so. I think the squirrels took that back.
Our fourth co-host, Uatu, is here, but he has sworn only to watch and to never interfere.
Good for him. Today we watched Thor: The Dark World, which originally premiered November 8th, 2013, directed by Alan Taylor, written by Christopher L. Yost, Christopher L. Marcus, I don't know if that's true, Stephen McFeely, what a great name, Don Payne, and Robert Rodat. When the Dark Elves attempt to plunge the universe into darkness, Andrew, Thor must embark on a perilous and personal journey that will reunite him with Dr. Jane Foster. Andrew, in a sentence or less, what'd you think? What'd you take from this?
As you know, as I'm sure you've seen, this is known as the worst Marvel movie, and I think it does not deserve it in any capacity. This is, while severely flawed in many ways, in some ways that make me angry, this is leaps and bounds a better movie than the original Thor in almost every capacity. What about you?
Well,
you hated it.
I did. Now, I don't know how much of this, I guess, sentence or less, what's the point of all this? Now, I'm not the person to ask, so whatever.
Not the person to ask about your opinion.
I'm not the person to
ask
about
me
Marvel.
Because I know.
No,
I know you hated it.
I'm not the person to ask about Marvel movies, even though we have created a show half based on my opinions of Marvel movies. But I kind of alluded to this last episode, and I don't know if this is spoiling. I don't know if our lists are spoilers or I don't know. You can cut all this crap out. I feel
you say that, and I almost never do.
I know. Every time we're like, "Hey, do this in post," and you're just like, "Post is just for taking out ums. Post isn't for editing content. Take that out."
Mostly because by the time I get to the point where it's like, take that out, it's like, oh my god, I'm like 7 minutes into this tirade you went on.
I have to go back. I'm not dealing with that. I alluded last episode that I feel like all of these movies are just going to be like, well, put that at the bottom, and then we'll watch the next movie, and I'll go, well, put that at the bottom. I genuinely hated this. This is gonna be a blast. I will say Kirsten thought it was boring, but she said Thor was her favorite of the group because she feels like he has an actual arc.
I disagree with that.
I know you do.
I think of the broad strokes, sure, but
to be fair, I mean, nobody else really has an arc.
I'd say Captain America sort of does. But it's not so much, he doesn't have so much of a character arc in that he changes, but in that, like, everything changes around him. Like, he changes others, and that's his arc.
I guess, but I think that's...
that's
a cop-out. That's not the...
I don't disagree with that.
That's Die Hard, the Christmas movie. I don't know. I don't want to have this conversation now that you like this, and I'm like, I hated this.
Here's the thing. That's what... I mean, I've been pretty lukewarm to positive on all of these so far. Mm-hmm. And you've hated pretty much each one less than, or hated each one more than the last. So, like, let's just get into it. I do want to say, before we start, I had two things I want to say, and I don't remember what they are. I only remember what one of them was.
I have one thing I want to say whenever you're ready.
Go ahead, because I don't remember what my other thing was.
I've been meaning to say this. I have two things to say, actually. And I've been meaning to say this.
And you remember
one
both of them.
For a while. Every time I see Chris Hemsworth with his hammer, all I can think about is how that's like probably 2 pounds of foam core. And it always takes me out of it. It's like a conscious thought I have literally every time it's on the screen. My other put up is, I wonder why. Or, sorry, are we done yet? My first put up is that hammer is definitely made of foam core. My second put up is, why did they make 3 Iron Man movies before we had a second? Like, wouldn't it be cool if it was just like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Avengers? Iron Man 2, Captain America 2, Thor 2, Avengers.
Sure, but this at the time, it was Iron Man is the most popular, the one that's already signed, and we can quickly get his next movie out while we're still figuring out what to do with the rest of them. Like, that's why we got 2 of them before, and then we got the third one just because they had already made 2 and they made everybody else's first. And everybody wants Iron Man, so they know an Iron Man's an easy sell. So yeah, you slap them in a third movie before you get to anybody else's sequels. But I mean,
did you remember?
The one thing I will say about this movie that I absolutely hate is it cannot pick a fucking lane. I hate all the sci-fi bullshit in it. I hated it when I saw it in theaters. I hate it now. All the fucking lasers, the elves are basically space aliens with spaceships and lasers.
It's stupid.
And I hate it. I do remember now the other thing I said. So when we saw Thor, you said that it was the most like modern Marvel movie we had seen yet. Yeah. This is the most modern Marvel movie we have seen yet. It short of like, I don't think there's I mean, you're the one making the tally. I don't think there's a giant blue space laser in this one.
There is not. I didn't
There's
see
a giant red
space
laser, tornado.
But there are a ton of slow motion circle pans. But this felt like a Flanderization of the Avengers.
This is also just like, it's in that middle ground of like playing it too safe, where like the first Thor has like a bunch of sci-fi bullshit, but it still says like they're gods if you want them to be gods, they're aliens if you want them to be aliens, and it doesn't really pick a side in a way that I did not care for, but I prefer, I guess, to this, because this does both. Like,
I guess I never really felt like they were aliens, and we kind of talked about this in our Thor episode, and I was thinking of, we talked about what the 9 realms were and what any of that meant, and I think they're parallel universes.
Probably.
Based off stuff displayed to me in this movie. I think Asgard is not in space. Our entire universe is, I kind of want to say, Midgard.
That is probably true. Although
I don't think,
I guess the further we'll get
answer
into these movies, I think we may get more answers that refute that, but maybe not. Because as we go further into space with Guardians and then, you know, the later movies, I don't know if it ever definitively says no.
I don't think it actually can.
Yeah, but like, I don't know. And here's the thing, like, the Asgardians as aliens is in a way fine to me. My problem is the first movie says like magic is just like science we don't understand. This movie says, no, magic is full on like sci-fi bullshit. And I think my breaking point isn't the elves and their spaceship and their guns. It's the Asgardians and their guns and their turrets and their spaceships shooting lasers. And now even everybody's swords and everything are basically lightsabers.
None of this stuff existed in the first Thor movie.
And it never exists again.
Ugh. I'm glad it doesn't exist again because it's bad.
It's dumb. But I will say, like, I'm grading this on the Marvel scale because I'll say, like, I would not watch this movie again. I wouldn't watch almost any of these again, short of the first Avenger, maybe. But on the sliding scale of Marvel movies, I think this one is the most interesting. I think some of the action's good. I think some of the different, like, sci-fi ideas are fun. It gives everybody a little more to do, for better or for worse. I think the big problem is, like all these Marvel movies, as we continue going on, there's a lot of excess. The final third act is just a lot of nonsense that just keeps going. At least it's not just like, I think the first Thor movie is boring. I don't think this movie is boring. I don't think this one's boring. I think it's long and it's
I didn't care about anything in this. I didn't
see, that's how I felt about the first one.
I didn't know why they wanted me to care about the Dark Elves. I didn't know why they wanted me to care about Thor's mom. I didn't know why they wanted me to care about this guy that Christopher Eccleston turns into a weirdo and then takes him into prison and then breaks everybody. Like, all of this stuff was just like things happening on a screen to me.
I guess that's where I landed in the first movie. And I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying. Because like I said, like, I'm defending this movie in that, like, I do not think this is the worst Marvel movie. I think Thor is way more boring.
Do you think this is... I guess there's the answer.
Thor is this is better than Thor in almost every capacity, except for runtime. I think the first Thor is unbearably boring, incredibly uninteresting, completely bland. This at least has, like, I don't care for the sci-fi bullshit, but that gives it...
has sci-fi bullshit?
But it has personality and ideas. I don't agree with them. I don't think they're necessarily great, but they're there. I think my big thing with Thor 1 is it is completely bland and safe and uninteresting in every possible way. This commits to something. I think it commits to the wrong things. Like I said, it goes from that wishy-washy stuff of the first movie to full-on sci-fi that I do not care for, but at least it commits. And that, I would rather have a failed commitment than just nothing at all.
I think this is, especially coming off of the Avengers from 2 weeks ago, I don't know, it hits all the same beats. They even have the same, like, after a big noise scene, we go to them just, like, eating in the room. It has all the same weird, like, it doesn't let anything breathe. It always has to quip. It looks gross. I think all of the realms look terribly gross.
So to put this into a weird placement once we get all these episodes out there into the ether.
Oh, I get it.
I was wondering if you were going to say that. Once we get all these episodes out there, to put this in a weird placement, having watched last week the Snyder Cut, majority of this movie, any point in this movie that does not take place on Earth has that same dearth of color.
Yeah.
And just like horrible saturation that the Snyder Cut has.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Snyder Cut, again, for better or for worse, it's a choice. In this, it just is like a thing. And I think it's honestly, in this, I think it's because 90% of it is green screen stuff. And if you just kind of mute everything, it's a lot easier to hide that. Because it is so muted. But when you get to Earth, like, the one thing I'll say about that final scene, I think there's some interesting ideas. It goes on way too long. And
it's bright.
But it's bright, it's colorful, it's filmed during the day.
So here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Unless you wanted to continue on that route. I have something...
I think I don't really have much more to say other than just beating a dead horse.
Kyle's the Thor guy, right?
Yep. My brother Kyle.
Brother of the show, Kyle.
Point that out rather than just stating a name. Everybody be like, no, Thor is Thor.
What? And we kind of talked about this a tiny bit during the first Thor episode, but I was really trying to figure out what I want out of Thor. I don't really have a ton of stock into Thor. I think he's fine, but I just don't really have any interest in the other realms. I feel like I like a torn Thor between Jane Foster and his responsibilities on Asgard, but I don't necessarily think I like or care about anything with Asgard or the other realms.
I don't like Asgard as it appears in here. I guess if you were going to do Thor, I guess I would want it to be like a fantasy thing, but not the fantasy that it's trying to do here and in the first movie, where it's just like Lord of the Rings, but stupid. I guess, I mean, honestly, and this is with a little bit of future knowledge, if you want me to say what I want out of Thor, it's the third Thor movie, which is not what I just described, but it is.
But I'm just trying to think, like, what something. I wonder what popular Thor storylines are, and like what, because even, I mean, I don't really remember. I remember enjoying Thor the Mighty Avenger, because that was like a fun thing, and that was like Thor and the Warrior Lady Sif and the Warriors 3 just like hanging around Earth, and I think that's fun. But I wonder how many, like, if there are big Asgard Thor stories that are really well received, and like that's what people, because it's weird, because with Thor, he's your like medieval fantasy guy. He's where you can tell those stories.
As I understand it, I mean, I know there are big, like, Asgard Thor stories that people like. The big one that I know, I think is, I don't read a lot of Thor, so I have not read these stories, but I think it's what Malekith is from, and that's the story with the Cask of Winters and all that. But it also, if I remember correctly, takes place partially on Earth, where they open the Cask of Winters on Earth, and then I think it's like one of those event stories that, like, in the early 80s, where it's just like, you know, everybody's comics for that couple months took place in a snowstorm because the Cask of Winters. But I don't know.
I just wondered, like, what I want from Thor, you know, like,
I want him to swing his hammer. Like, I guess for me, what I want is Thor doing something that's interesting, because Chris Hemsworth, I think is an interesting and charismatic actor. I don't think he gets to do a lot in these two movies, and honestly, not a whole lot even in his appearance in Avengers. And I think a lot of it is because it's still rooted in this, like, he has to be serious.
I do feel like it has this stilted it like the character kind of restricts Chris Hemsworth.
And that's the big thing, is like the nice thing about, you had mentioned The Mighty Avenger, is it is a lot of just like Thor kind of being Thor, and bombastic and big and engaging, because they try to do that, and there's glimpses of it, not in this movie, but in the last movie.
I think in the Avengers he has some of that, like,
yeah, a little bit
bravado.
But like in this, he's just kind of like dour. The whole movie, while you said like it's full of like jokes and it doesn't really let a lot sit, the whole movie, if you were to summarize it by its
not
story
like a
beats,
fun movie.
It's incredibly dour, and it kind of a downer. A lot of deaths, a lot of misery. Like I said, I gave my defense of the movie. That's basically, outside of like a couple points that may be brought up, that's basically where my defense ends. I think this movie is better than the original Thor, and I think it has a lot of neat things going for it, but it's also like, it's mostly just like everybody shits on this movie, and I think there are far worse movies that we've watched than this one.
I think, again, every week that's the worst movie we watched, but I kept saying I only knew that this one was the bad one, and I would certainly agree. I want to say, and this is leading into the actual plot line, I kind of already hated it from the beginning when it had to tell me a story about the villain. I know a lot of these movies have done this, but I just really felt it with like the voiceover of, here's the origins of the villain of the movie.
The big thing that I do not care for in this movie, and this is a microcosm of what I don't care for about the Marvel universe, is that it has selective history, and also a lot of like events are condensed into a very short time frame that the movie pretends is not as short as it is. Like, Jane Foster and Thor are star-crossed lovers who met for a total of maybe 48 hours.
And then were separated for 2 years.
And it's fine that they had something, but like they don't see each other for 2 years, and then it's this whole thing like before he comes back to Earth, it's a lot of like everybody telling him like, oh my God, we know you love Jane and you can't stop thinking about Earth, but it's time to move on. You got to be king. And it's like, he just met this woman like, I guess 2 years ago, but like they knew each other for maybe 48 hours, maybe 72. I don't really know, but it was nighttime at one point in that movie.
And there's nothing really in that time other than just like, we are both attractive.
Yeah, honestly, in their 48 hours, I think they maybe spent 4 of it together. It's bizarre. And like, similarly, and I could be remembering the movie wrong, but I brought this up in Avengers. This seems to go off of how the fandom remembers Loki, as opposed to what Loki actually did and his motivations were. As I recall, and I could be wrong, Loki's motivations in the first movie were not that he wanted to be king. I think he specifically says that. It was that he wanted to be worthy of Odin by basically setting up an event so that he could come out as a hero.
I think there was something about him, because when Odin goes into the all sleep,
his plan involves saving Odin when he goes into the Odin sleep.
But I thought his end goal was still the throne.
Maybe, but I mean,
there was more to it than just like, I want to be king. It was like, I want to know who I am. I want to figure out my rightful place.
This one says like basically he hates Thor, he hates Odin, and he only loves his mommy. But I do know for certain in the first Thor movie, it's established that he does not hate Odin. He just wants Odin's approval because he does not feel he has it.
He feels like he's in Thor's shadow.
But this casts that aside because Avengers had to make him the big, like, mustache twirling villain as opposed to the still villain. But in Thor, he's just kind of like, I mean, he's the trickster god. He sets up a plan that is not necessarily evil, and I am not one to really defend Loki, but it's not necessarily evil so much as it's bad. But it's set up more as a ruse than any like truly malicious intent. It's devoid of morality. I think it's devoid of morality and malice. Whereas in Avengers, it is full on malice. It is power hungry nonsense. And then in this, it just continues from Avengers, but then it wants to go back to like, well, people really like Loki, so we got to make sure he's still kind of a good guy, but we also got to like stay true to the fact that we made him a villain. So it does like a bunch of wishy-washy back and forth stuff where Loki's motivations are not clear, and the movie thinks it's in this cutesy kind of like, well, of course we don't know Loki's motivations. He's always a trickster, fooling everyone, including the audience. But I'm going like, as a writer, you need to know that answer. You need to know what Loki's doing, and I don't feel like anyone in the writer's room could specifically and definitively tell you what Loki's plan was and what his motivations are and what he's doing. They just, all they care about, as long as he does something on both sides of the morality scale, they're good.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tom Hiddleston does a fine Loki. I don't care about any of these Asgardians. I think they're all painfully boring.
Each one of them gets more of a thing to do in this movie, and they feel like they exist less in this movie than they do in the first one, which is weird. With the exception of Heimdall, who I think he doesn't do a lot in this movie, but I think it's honestly 100% Idris Elba's charm. He has a couple lines that he delivers that he has like this weird stoic charm that worked for me. He has a couple lines where he kind of like, I don't know what it is, but there's something about his delivery where he just like sells a character that is more interesting than we get to see.
I mean, his whole thing about like, there's treason afoot, Odin. Oh, where? And he's like, right here, buddy. I think it's, I mean, his voice is very booming, and it's this weird kind of like inflected monotone. He always feels a little like, this is just my 9 to 5, but that's like his 9 to 5, and damn it, he's gonna do it.
But like the other Warriors 3 the Warriors 3 and Sif all get to do something, but none of it matters, with the exception of Hogan? Is that his name? Who is basically in the beginning of the movie so that they can say, well, I know you have other things to do, actor who plays Hogan, so
you stay here.
Stay here with your people? There's like a thing where Thor's like, I know you need to stay here with your people, and it's like, isn't his people the Asgardians?
That's what I was thinking too.
What the fuck is going on here? But it was just like, well, he couldn't show up for the remaining shoots that we had with the Warriors 3, or we only wrote an action beat for 3 people, and Sif is here, so we got to get rid of one of the Warriors 3.
At least in the first Thor, they all had their stupid, dumb, singular character moment, where it's like, or at least Half-Staff did, where he's like eating the boar. Like, oh, I know who you are. Like, I know your single character trait. This, everybody's just kind of another person in a cape. There's even like some weird side eyes between Jane Foster and Lady Sif.
I was gonna say that. That's weird, and I thought it was gonna go somewhere, and it
doesn't.
And I guess I didn't want it to go anywhere, but also I don't like that it happens.
Was a
and
thing,
then just
yeah.
Doesn't do anything. It's weird. I thought like there was gonna be. There's not even a conversation between them, which, I mean, would fail the Bechdel test even more than it already does with this movie. Between them, they speak. I don't think there's a conversation.
Jane Foster goes, I'm not hungry, and then Lady Sif goes, good, then come with me.
You're right. That is a conversation.
Check on the Bechdel test. Now, I don't know. Like, they kind of allude to things. I mean, there's a couple lines throughout the cast about, like, this is your rightful spot, and you should be banging Asgardian women, and she's just an earthling, and then Lady Sif is like, have a drink with me. You can't be only staring at one realm when you're king. You got 8 other ones, and it's all just weird and nothing.
That's kind of the whole movie.
Heyo!
Basically, the gist of the movie is Christopher Eccleston is an elf, and all the elves were apparently killed off by Odin's pappy a million billion years ago.
The most exciting thing about this movie for me was every now and then hearing Christopher Eccleston in his distorted voice and being like, I think that's Christopher Eccleston. And then seeing the credits and I was like, boom, got it.
All the elves were killed off because they had a super weapon called the Ether.
Which is the giant space sword.
Okay, so
no, that's not
the Ether.
That's the...
Speaking of the Ether, so by the end of the movie, they allude to it early in the movie, but at the post-credits scene with the Collector, we learn that this is one of the Infinity Stones. I hope you have not looked it up. Do you know which Infinity Stone it is? Do you need me to run through what they are?
There's what? Space, reality, time...
Space, reality, mind, time, and power.
The Tesseract is an Infinity Stone.
Yes.
And I'm going to say the Tesseract... I know this isn't what you asked, but I'm interested now. The Tesseract is...
As long as you're interested in the podcast we're doing.
So we have space... Hold on. We have space, time, mind, love.
Space, time, mind, reality, and power.
I think... Oh, this is good. I'm going to say I mean, not knowing what the other ones are either. Because I think some of these, I could kind of go either way. I am going to say, I'm trying to figure out what the Tesseract was used for. And I know that's bad because it's not like they had that idea.
Yeah, I am not certain if the Tesseract in Captain America was supposed to be an Infinity Stone or not. I think it was supposed to just be the Cosmic Cube.
That's
and
what
they retroactively made it a stone later.
So it's not like I can really take any past stuff. So for the ether, I'm thinking power, but that doesn't.
Okay, lock in power.
Just to get this.
Because I don't want to cycle too long. So
I know, and you can. I'm just going to say. I'm going to say the ether is. Are you going to tell me now, or am I going to learn when the Infinity Gauntlet comes out?
No, I'll tell you once you've made a decision on.
Oh, but then I can't guess on the other ones.
It's not really going to matter because I think we only ever see one more. The other. No, I take that back. One of them. No, all 5 of. I take it back. All 5 of them are established in a movie. The other ones are more clear.
I'm going to say that power is the ether and reality is the Tesseract.
So you are wrong on both counts.
Love it.
I would have made the same guess at least on the ether, because I don't know what I would say on, because I didn't even think to try and figure out what the Tesseract was before I looked it up. I thought the ether was power 2 because Christopher Eccleston uses it to basically become super strong. And before I looked up what stone it was, I looked up what the ether did, and it said when he took it into his body, it gave him like super strength and durability.
Sounds like power.
Well, you and I would be fucking dumbos because the ether is actually the reality stone. It did jack shit related to reality.
Like, I guess you could argue, so here's the thing. In Thor, the Dark World, where the Infinity Stone known as Ether existed, they did hop through realities, but that was not because of the stone. Ether.
It had nothing to do with the stone. Because I thought the same thing, but I was like, there's no way, because it had nothing to do with the stone. The stone was completely unrelated to that. The Tesseract is the space stone.
I was thinking space.
I could say, yeah, but I would say I guess they use in this one, they specifically say they use the Tesseract to travel. They say that in the Dark World.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, they mentioned it was one of the other ways to travel to Midgard.
Then I'll take space. I think that's...
But I would say, as far as like knowing that it's essentially the Cosmic Cube and what they use it in, I would say it's reality before space, but by this point, whatever. But yeah, the ether is in no way... I would have said power too. It does power stuff. It does absolutely nothing related to reality. It in no way affects reality.
It does nothing with space. It does nothing with time. It doesn't do anything with mind. It does.
The other 3 stones, when we see them,
are more clear.
I think the next one we see may not be. Although I do think in that one they specifically refer to it as a stone as soon as we see it, or at least within the movie. And I would say it does do what they say it does. I just don't think it's the clearest way to...
Do you think they knew what stone it was in this movie?
I mean, I would have to say no, because there's no way. I think in this movie, it was power. Because if I don't know, but I think power is red normally. I could be wrong, but I think in the comics, power is the red stone. I could be completely wrong on that. But as far as it's concerned, it's power.
It's purple.
I feel like it was power until they got to a different movie where they wanted to use power, and then they just said, fuck it, the ether can be whatever the hell we want it to be.
Power is purple, by the way.
In the comics?
Yeah. Or, I don't know, in this graphic I found on Google Images.
Because I do know at least 1 or 2 of the stones changes. I guess unless they added a new color, 2 stones probably swapped. But I know at least 1 stone is a different color in the movies than it was originally in the comics.
Yeah, I don't know. It's impossible to look up Marvel things anymore since the
I
Marvel
know.
Cinematic Universe is the canon Marvel. I feel like if you're going to sit there and say, it doesn't matter. If you're writing a script and you're like, let's introduce Infinity Stones. We're going to do Thanos. Well, we already knew they were going to do Thanos at the end of the last movie. So we already knew that. And so if you're going to commit and say, okay, these things are Infinity Stones, more little Easter eggs. You are a writer. I'm a dumb artist. You sit down and you say, okay, we're going to do Infinity Stones. Don't you at that point write out your Infinity Stones?
I would say.
It's not like you're going to sit there and be like, this is an Infinity Stone. But I don't want to deal with figuring out which one it is yet.
I could say, this could just be the ether, and they didn't decide whether it was a stone or not yet.
Yeah.
But this movie specifically states that it's a stone.
That's what I mean.
Therefore, they have to have an answer. But if they have an answer, out of all of them, reality is the one that, I mean, I guess they all are very specific to a power, but like I said, like reality has to do something other than what it does in this movie, where it basically just makes a dude superhuman.
Well, and he has like these weird
power.
tendril things that are just like strong concussive blasts. He just knocks Thor around with these ether tendril things. And like when everybody tries to touch Jane Foster, when it has it, it blows him off.
It's fucking stupid. And again, I would believe it, although I would say it's more space than reality, but I would believe it if it was tied to the shenanigans that happened in this movie with everybody hopping dimensions and worlds.
And maybe it's something where they didn't, like, Thor the Dark World script was already written. And then they said, hey, we're doing Thanos, tie this in, make it an Infinity Stone. And so you can't weave that into, you know, like, I understand that maybe you can't weave that into the story of Thor the Dark World. But the world is your oyster at this point. You can make any Infinity Stone. And I can only assume they said reality because in Thor the Dark World, where it's introduced, everybody's reality hopping without realizing that it doesn't have anything to do with that. It's stupid.
It's really fucking stupid.
Also, since we already talked about the Collector, and we don't go in any sort of order here, I don't like the Collector's little, like, excellent, now I have 5 left. But, like, he knows where one of the other 5 is? It's not like he needs to find them.
That was just a stupid end credits teaser thing to tell you that there are 4 other stones, even though we know that where one of them is. I hated more all of his stupid hand motions that he did when he like bowed and he did like a whole like gymnastics routine with his arms.
I didn't like
that was fucking dumb.
Why did he say 5 when they already told him where one of those 5 were? And he was already like, yeah, we shouldn't have them all in the same spot.
It's an end credits teaser thing.
You know, I read through all 12 of the writers for this movie, and it feels like it.
You have the Marvel continuity writer, you have the Thor writer, you have the witty banter writer, you have the
movies by committee.
Yeah, I mean,
you know who's good in this movie? Never mind. That's not a bit. That's just something that we'll talk about later that doesn't have anything to do with this movie.
So you had said in the original movie that Darcy, by the end, had become a scientist. We learned in this movie that's not true. She's still an intern who doesn't really know what's going on.
And the movie doesn't really know what to do with her. Everybody, like I said, everybody's flanderized. I didn't mind Darcy in the first one. She was like, it's a quirky thing.
I don't mind her here because I think out of everybody, I think her like
she was too much
dry crap. My thing is I did not care for everything they did with Stellan Skarsgård.
Yeah,
all of his whole thing about like how he stripped naked and ran around the.
Now he's like crazy. Easter Island heads.
What? No, what is it? What are those things called? I can't think of it. Anyway,
it's that monolith that has all the languages and how to rebuild society in Georgia.
He runs around naked for no reason other than it's zany, and then they like get him out of a nut house, but it doesn't matter. Especially like my big thing with that, other than I hate everything about it, is that they ask about it. I think Jane asks Darcy where he is or something. Or maybe they just make a reference to him. I don't know. And then it cuts to a news thing about that.
But that's like the recording of the news thing.
Then, later, when we are introduced to him actually in the movie, he's giving a lecture. And you're supposed to think, okay, he's giving a lecture. And I'm thinking like, well, he's dressed he looks a little like crazy and disheveled, but I guess they just let him give a lecture. And then he's in a nut house. If you're going to do this, that's where you start it. You start with that so that you can have the actual like juxtaposition of like, oh, it looks like he's telling a lecture, and then you finally like swivel the camera around and you see he's just telling a bunch of people in a psych ward.
I think you give a lecture.
On top of that, we learn that Darcy didn't know where he was because later we watch the same news footage that we saw earlier in the movie to establish where he was. There are 3 setups to what's going on with him, and you only need one of them.
You shouldn't have any of them.
Well, yeah, his whole thing about him being crazy is stupid.
Like, I think there's something there about, like, hey, the Avengers was hard on Stellan Skarsgård.
Sure, but, like,
he seemed to have taken to it well.
Like, he's not the only one. Like, he goes, like, full-on crazy, and then as soon as they, like, take him out and he watches some birds fly through the ground, he's like, yeah, never mind, I guess I'm fine. And then after that, he's just, like, a little, not even kooky. He's just like hugs. After that, he's basically fine. He does science without his pants on because he says it helps him think, and he hugs for a little too long. Beyond that, like, he's fine.
Yeah, kind of like we talked about Iron Man 3, the British police have no idea who Thor is. I guess. Since when Thor finally shows up, they're not like, okay, take it from here. They're like, get away from her, Thor. She's dangerous. Yeah. Do you know who I am? Like, come on.
I also like how after that, when he takes Jane to Asgard, when you teleport through to Asgard using the Bifrost, it doesn't just like teleport you, it like sends a horrendously dangerous shaft of energy that sucks up anything within like I don't know, 12-foot circle around you.
That seems dangerous. I don't know.
But I mean,
I really didn't like Darcy in this. I thought it felt really like it was trying too hard. Because when Natalie Portman's dating Chris O'Dowd at the beginning...
That's another thing that doesn't matter. It's just so they can have another zany scene where you find out her phone works. That doesn't matter because 2 seconds later they just find the rest of the stuff. They don't care.
But like, when Darcy shows up and just is like, I'm a kooky, unique person. I was like, ugh. This is so dumb. And it doesn't help that like I said, everybody needs to have their quip. Even Loki has like a weird quip when they're driving the spaceship.
I didn't mind Loki in this. My big thing is just, I don't understand his motivations. And again, I get it. You're not supposed to, but also like, someone has to know, and nobody knows. Tom Hiddleston doesn't know. The writers don't know. The director doesn't know. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that he's elusive.
Loki's role is to be, like you said, elusive, but like Loki's plan is to move the script forward.
Pretty much.
Like,
he spends majority of the movie in a cell.
Yeah, I don't know why.
And it establishes that his trickster stuff is stuff he learned from their mom. Yeah. Because she does the same kind of magic, and later on he says like
he distinctly says it, yeah.
Or you have our mother's like tricks or something like that.
You learned your tricks from mom. I hate this movie.
I don't know. I don't know. All of it is like whatever. And there's like the whole reveal that like Odin is actually Loki that's stupid because I think they show their hand a little like it's very clear he's not really dead.
Yeah.
But also I would say like, I don't know, as the second Thor movie and still relatively early in the Marvel universe and knowing that actors weave in and out in movies in general, it could be like, I don't know, maybe they just wrote him out and you're done.
Well, and we've already seen him die and come back. Like, what does death
I was going to say,
mean?
it's pretty clear he's probably not dead. Although, what is death to an Asgardian? At the beginning, Odin says, like, we're not gods. We can die. But then it's also just like...
Nobody dies.
I don't know. Sometimes you can just get stabbed and die, and sometimes you get stabbed and you're fine.
Do they die? Or do they go into Odin sleep?
Odin sleep is different. Odin sleep is when Odin takes a little nap. And he's basically dead, but not dead. But then he gets up.
We're gods. We could die... in Odin's sleep.
I don't know. Like, their whole plan is nonsense, and his whole thing is nonsense. They show their hand too early because it's very clear that he's probably not actually dead. But also, like, when they have someone investigating, like, it very clearly shows the Loki shimmer, and it also lingers too much on this nobody guard in every scene he's in.
Well, and I thought that was the same guard Loki turned into when he and Thor were
probably
escaping. It rewards the attentive.
I did like when he turned into Captain America.
I didn't, because he had Chris Evans' voice, but all the other times they all had the real voice.
No, he can switch his voice to whoever.
Oh, Thor can't.
It's Thor can't.
I didn't like how Thor was like, let's use my magic to get out of here unseen. And then he turns Thor into Sif. And I'm like, but you're still Loki. You're supposed to be in prison.
Yeah. Well, that's where he's just like fucking around. Which I don't agree with, but I mean, that's what it is. I don't like how this movie puts a lot of effort. I will say there's a lot of setup and paying off in this movie, for better or for worse. Like, a lot of this movie sets up and then pays off later. Nothing really comes out of left field. The big thing, though, is it sets up too much to the point that, like, it puts a lot of effort into setting up Loki's illusion abilities, including throwing it in with their mom, to the point that, like, you can't believe Loki dies because it shows you so much that every literal fucking thing that happens with Loki is a deceit. Even him in the cell, not looking like a disheveled maniac, is a deceit. Like, it goes to such great lengths to tell you that never believe anything you see with Loki, that, like, it's hard to take anything. And again, it's because it wants you to be like, can Loki be trusted? And the movie's answer is, maybe.
Do we need him to be trusted? We need him to do what he needs to do.
He does what he needs to do. He can be trusted to do that, but he also can't be trusted completely because he's still going to be a liar.
Yeah.
But, like, to what ends is he lying? Who fucking cares?
I mean, I know people like Tom Hiddleston's Loki. I know people like that, like, oh, what's going on now? How elusive. But it's so frustrating to just watch a character that purely exists to just be like, oh, I bet you thought this. Oh, I bet you thought, like, yeah, I get it. Nothing's as it seems. Great. Love it. Cool. Like, do something with it. Everything has to be punctuated with Loki being like, but actually.
It's annoying because, like, you sit through everything, like Loki's death, and just go like, okay, so is he going to pop up now? Or is he going to pop up later? Or what are we doing here? Mm-hmm. And then, like, when you get to the Odin thing, and it's revealed to be Odin, it's like, yeah, I know, I get it, but, like, to what end? And the movie's answer is to no end, because it doesn't matter. That's for the next movie to figure out. And it's just, I don't know, a lot of that, like, pissing about irritates me. But I mean, that's majority of the movie. Like, Christopher Eccleston's stuff in this movie is almost non-existent.
Yes.
Like, it does not, their whole thing, like, it takes up a good chunk of the movie, but it doesn't actually matter to most of the movie.
He is just an enemy that doesn't matter.
I mean, honestly, it takes up a good chunk of the movie only because this movie has so many long action scenes. There are so many chases and stuff that I just did not care for. When they're on the ship flying around, and when he's on the ship flying around, and they're shooting lasers everywhere, and there's tons of fighting, and I was just like, I don't care.
I didn't care about anything with lasers. I hated that so much.
I hated it too. The stupid spaceship, all of it, it's all dumb bullshit, and I hate every bit of it. I hated their stupid escape plan. I hated flying on the ship and then jumping out of the ship to get into a different ship, and I was like, oh my god, we're done shooting at things, and then it turns out there's another ship that saw them and that's shooting, and I just was like, can we fucking be done yet?
Hey, here's a question. When they escape, they have to fly the ship through the crevice in the mountain. Did Loki just do that every time?
I don't know. I was wondering the same thing.
Or did Loki like walk and climb up to that?
I mean, Loki's powers seem to be whatever the fuck we want.
But he can't
fly. For all we know, he just, I don't know, maybe he can.
No, that's said in the movie.
Oh, you're right. I don't know. Maybe he can teleport. Like, it seems to be that he can teleport as far as Avengers tells us. And hell, even maybe the original Thor movie tells us? I don't know. Yeah, speaking of...
No, oh, no. I hated all the sci-fi stuff. I hated the escape from Asgard. I think that could be cool. I thought it was like a fun thing when all of the Warriors 3 tell him, like, if you screw this up, we'll kill you. That was like a fun thing. I like how it was kind of told as they were planning it. It was like a Ocean's 11
I hated that. I actually hated that because it felt like wasting my time more than anything else, because it didn't give us any information that we
weren't seeing.
Going to, yeah, it was set to be like a fun heist thing, but honestly, we could have just like cut all of that out and I would not have had any difficulty following any of it. And it's not like it would have been any less interesting. It just would have been less repetitive.
I think the biggest problem with the heist, like the planning or the simultaneous planning and executing, is really just when they get in the spaceship, which I guess is when that effectively ends.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's all over by that point.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mind it in all the other stuff, especially since, I mean, everybody does have their role, and you get to see them do it in, like, little vignettes. But, like, that should be a way cooler part of the movie than this 15-minute thing that is 10 minutes of a stupid, dumb space battle.
I think another big problem with this movie is because it's a Marvel movie, well, because it's a superhero movie, it has to be, like, a supervillain movie. So... like we said, Malekith like doesn't really matter to the movie. I think the movie is more interesting. I guess you need something for them to band together on, but I think it's more interesting as like a Loki and Thor, like I guess maybe understanding each other or like figuring out what exactly their relationship is for the audience and for them themselves. I think maybe it's more interesting movie if it's a movie that deals with the fallout of the first movie and Avengers, kind of like Iron Man 3 tried to do and failed. But if it deals with the fallout of those, and instead it focuses more on, like, if the movie was, can Loki be trusted? Then if you do a lot of this wishy-washy stuff and then try and give us some kind of answer or allow Thor to come to some kind of conclusion of his own, That's more interesting. Instead, that is just a small part. Honestly, that's really just like one, not really scene, but like one extended sequence of this movie. The breakout up until Loki's quote unquote death, which is in the middle of the movie and honestly not incredibly important overall.
Yeah. And it doesn't feel, since we've already seen his mom die and we've already seen Loki quote unquote die, it feels unimportant. Like they try and give it some grandiose, but it's like, I don't know, he doesn't get a Viking funeral.
When they did the Viking funeral, and then you see, I did like that Viking funeral sucked. It was too long and slow.
For a character that
boring.
We don't really care about.
Is she even in the first movie? I think she is, but I honestly do not remember.
She is, but she doesn't do anything. The only reason we care is because she's Thor's mommy.
But like, I did like when it's about to, because Asgard is kind of like, I guess, floating in space with like space waterfall. I did like when her boat, which is ahead of all the other boats of everybody else who died that we don't care about.
Yeah.
As opposed to her, who we don't care about but know her name.
She is supposed to be important.
When she comes to the edge of the waterfall, she's about to fall, and then like Odin slams his staff or does something, and it instead just like continues sailing, and then lights, like the fire I think goes out.
She turns
and then
into stars.
Lights, go up, and like she like turns into stars, and then the boat falls. I like that sequence. And when Loki died, I thought, is he going to turn into stars? Not because I knew he wasn't dead, but I was like, is that how he's going to like sell that this is his death?
Nope.
Because like the movie showed us that, and I thought it was showing us that for a reason, because that's what you do. When you take a scene like that doesn't seem like it really matters beyond just like Thor is sad because his mommy's dead. But when you show something like that, that felt like that was, again, set up for something. Because like I said, this movie does do a lot of setting up. Things happen that are set up, and I thought that was a setup because I knew Loki's death was coming. I was like, that's setting up how Loki's going to sell the audience on his death, as opposed to just having this dramatic scene where then his eyes roll back in his head, and Thor cries about that too. But instead, his eyes roll back in his head, and Thor cries about that too, and I went, what was the point of that then? Why did I sit there for 10 minutes watching a bunch of boats on fire?
Speaking of what was the point of that then, how about Jane Foster having literally no role in the movie?
She is at the center of this movie.
She is the MacGuffin.
It does not matter. She literally is the MacGuffin because MacGuffin
Thor's
becomes
mom
her,
to
like
die and just like looks sad and like out of place.
She is like shuffled between scenes. At the beginning of the movie, when she's like researching science stuff, I was like, okay, maybe it's going to be like the first movie, but they'll learn their lesson and actually have her do something other than talk about how Thor's muscles are big. But then she effectively, like, once she becomes one with the ether, she's basically gone from the movie. Mm-hmm. Also, the scene where they're inspecting her and she's like, this is a thermonuclear whatever. Hate it. I hate that shit. I hate this this stuff where they're full on like, this is super science from space aliens.
Well, and okay, I think,
and wink wink nudge nudge, and like, again, you could still go like, this is all magic, I guess, but it leans hard enough into sci-fi where I go like, I can no longer accept that.
My problem with it is, I think you could do something with, oh, is this a quantum molecularizer? And they're like, no, I'm doing magic. And they're like, well, are you molecularizing quantums? And they're like, yeah. Oh, I see what you're doing there. The problem is that she's on like a Minority Report computer. Yes. And we've already seen them with laser guns and spaceships and energy turrets and lightsabers. And it's just like,
that's what I'm saying. Like, you can do this stuff and it, I can accept it, but it leans full into like, this is
like, oh, you just don't realize that this is science.
You're a bunch of dumb future spacemen that think science is magic.
I hated Jane getting the ether.
I honestly don't even remember. She turns a hallway when they're like investigating the temporal space anomalies, and then like disappears into the place. They buried it underground, but they also like buried it in like a pocket dimension with a big pillar. Uh-huh. And apparently all you need to do to get it out is just like
look at
absentmindedly touch it.
Did she touch it?
I think she stuck her hand on it.
I thought she was just like
remember
looking at it.
She may have just looked at it. I honestly don't remember. But it gets sucked into her body, and then she comes back out and she's like, I'm fine. I did like the bit where Thor, I thought it was her at first, but it seemed Darcy's line and Thor's reaction to it seems to imply it was him. I did like that he controls the rain and that he also controls that it does not fall on him. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a fun bit. Like, she effectively does not matter in this movie. They go to Asgard. She doesn't even really have conversations with anybody. Nope. Like, she has a couple Like, think people talk
To her. At her.
at her. Yeah, and she responds, but there are not conversations. It's like she has like asides. Like, is this the quantum phase reader? And they're like, no, it's a soul searcher.
But that's really,
And then
I
she's
think
like-
that's really the only aside. All the other times, it's just people shuffling her around.
There's a lot of like, yeah, I mean, you're right. But like when Odin comes in, he says something. She goes, "Who do you think you are?" And he's like, "I am Odin." And then she's like, "I guess you're right." I think her aside is literally just being like, "Oh," and I was waiting for her to say it. But like, she does not hold conversations with anybody. She doesn't have a conversation with Loki. I mean, I like that she
She still doesn't even really have
punched
a
him.
conversation with Thor.
They don't even, yeah. He shows up and then she yells at him for leaving and asks why. And then she's like, I guess that's a good reason. And then he's like, come with me to Asgard and shut the fuck up. Never speak again. Bye. I mean, at the end, she's explaining how the science stuff works. But I mean, for better or for worse, like Darcy could have done it. Not that I needed her to do, like, not that it would be better that way. But I mean, Jane exists to become the MacGuffin.
Mm-hmm.
She is the MacGuffin. Like, she is the cart that they're wheeling the MacGuffin around in.
Yeah.
And it's weird. And I mean, spoilers, she's written out of the third movie. She's not in it.
I was surprised because I know Natalie Portman wasn't in one of them or whatever. Like, there was a thing about Natalie Portman. So I was surprised. I thought she was recast, honestly. So I was surprised to see her.
She's returning for the fourth, but she is not in the third. And I believe I think they knew she was out by Avengers 2 because I think there's a line about her in that one.
She's
as
in a
well,
coma.
that, like, off screen is like, Natalie Portman woke up.
I also hated at the end when Thor comes back and she runs outside and kisses him. I was 100% certain that was going to be a dream sequence.
Oh, when the rain at the beginning?
At the end, when she's like
Why
sitting
do I
at
not remember this.
when she's like sitting at the table and then Thor shoots because they're like,
I don't remember this at all, and I don't know why, because I watched this movie. I paid attention. You mean after she was talking about, like, is Thor ever... They were talking... when
oh
they're
no,
eating
I think this
breakfast?
was the after credits scene.
Oh, okay. So when I was watching the movie, they did the collector credits scene,
Uh-huh.
and then there was a thing to skip credits, and I was like, I hope that just like skips to the whatever's after the credits. And I assumed there probably wasn't anything, and I was gonna just fast forward it, but Disney Plus on the PlayStation is awful because if you like tap the stick, sometimes it skips 10 seconds,
Sometimes
and
it's
sometimes
just,
it
like, 40
skyrockets.
minutes.
When I was like, I'm gonna hit the skip credits thing because why would it be here other than just like if you have a skip credits option that usually works like the intro.
Yeah. It's not
option
like
where it
take
just
me
skips
back to the menu.
Yeah, and it went back to the menu, and I was just like, there probably wasn't anything.
Well, there
So
was.
maybe
You missed it.
let me pull up Disney Plus
Yeah, man, you gotta
so I can watch this and talk about this with you.
watch all
Give me 30
I
seconds.
watch all the credits, every movie. Although I did there might be an after international credits scene that I did not watch.
Oh, what is my login for this?
You're gonna watch this thing and then be like, "Yep, that was stupid."
Probably, but
We're professionals, damn it.
well, this is set up way better on here than it was in the app. Okay, yeah, this kiss is fucking stupid. It's weird because again, they've spent maybe at this point 3 days together. Oh, and the monster's still running around
Yuck, 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 yuck.
chasing burbs. Yeah, that kiss was dumb.
Doesn't it feel like a dream sequence? Because it's just like boom, kiss.
Well, and it's sudden and it's like a weird slowdown. Like it's not the same like slow motion that everything else in the movie is, but it is definitely like speed is slowed down to like I don't know 0.75. It's weird, but yeah, I had something else to say about this, but I guess not really. The one shot. What did you think of that?
I thought that one was fine. It was long, but I thought it did things interesting enough.
It's fun. It helps that I think. What the hell is his name?
Ben Kingsley.
I think he's fun to watch.
Mhm.
His ramblings, while most of the time that is something I would find annoying for whatever reason, works for me with him. The little bits with Sam Rockwell or whatever.
I like I think Sam Rockwell's good. I mean, that was more of like, man, Sam Rockwell, you're just a good guy, rather than anything like, oh man, how crazy is this?
I don't like that it doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, it's just a beat.
I just mean like the whole thing just doesn't really go anywhere. I assume since Shang-Chi's movie is called Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings, I assume we'll see the Mandarin and the Ten Rings and that. But
I don't
it's
know.
weird
I
that,
didn't see
like-
anything at the end of the credits where it said the Mandarin will return.
But it's fun enough. This is technically not the last one shot. It's the last thing that they call a Marvel one shot, but it's not like the last
Thing we need to watch.
thing. The other ones are like are non-canonical.
Oh well, then we're not watching them.
They're probably the best things. You'll probably hate them, but I think they're the better ones of these just because they're fun. But yeah, there's not a lot to say about it. It's fun. I like that it sets up the potential for something more for people who were pissed that the Mandarin was just that.
Yeah, I mean, I liked...
I don't have a problem with him just being that.
I didn't either, but I liked that idea of like, hey, you just like impersonated this guy, and you shouldn't.
Yeah. But yeah. So Seth, give me 2 put-ups and a put-down.
So I was actually really struggling, as I do, really struggling to figure these out, and I honestly was worried I wouldn't have them, so they're loose. My first one is, I don't think it's as good as it was in Thor, but, you know, going back to the conversation at the beginning of this about, like, what do you want from Thor in a Thor story? I like Loki and Thor's relationship, and while it doesn't feel earned or good when they are in Anaheim or wherever it is and he chops off his hand or whatever, I like the repertoire and them kind of like breaking out of Asgard, I guess, and that tentativeness that should be there but never really is, because the Loki's thing is just like, oh, but it's not this, whoa. And again, I liked when everybody was like, at each step of the way, everyone was like, if you botch this, I'm gonna kill you. And he's just like, yeah, get in line. But I like that, the idea of like working out Thor and Loki's relationship. My other put up is something we actually didn't even talk about, and I thought about bringing it up, but I really had nothing else to say about it. In the final fight scene, I thought it was an interesting way to get rid of Thor's hammer by having it go through all the realities and then just constantly just kind of like trying to make it back to him. I thought it was like a fine enough joke. I thought it was a good enough reason to get his hammer out of his hand and to kind of raise the stakes a little bit.
I agree. The weird thing though is like, while his hammer is, as the first movie indicates, the source of his power and everything, like, I never really feel like the hammer is the source of his power.
It's just a weapon, yeah.
So, like, getting it out of there, it's just like, he's not going to hit things as good with that styrofoam thing on a stick.
Is that the lightning? Have we seen Thor do lightning without his hammer?
I mean, as of this movie, everything is powered to him by the hammer. But without the hammer, he's just, I guess, like a strong guy.
So there, you can say that's his power.
I mean, it is. It's just, again, like, it's the movie, like, I don't know. There's something about it, like, when he didn't have his hammer, it didn't really feel like he was that.
Yeah, they didn't do anything.
It didn't feel like he was faring any better with or without.
Yeah, I agree with that. They didn't really do anything to increase the tension of, like, oh, now he doesn't have his hammer. My put down is all of the space stuff. All of the spaceship Dark Elf bullshit. I hated that so much. It felt so out of place. I know... Especially, I mean, board games is kind of my thing. I know there is a big theme thing going on with, like, oh, it's Greek mythology, but it's all, like, techno, or it's Greek mythology, but it's all, like, steampunk, or what, like, I know there's a thing about taking these mythologies and putting them in different settings, and I think that's a neat concept. I don't think it's a neat, plot.
I disagree, only that... I think it could be a neat plot, or like a good movie. I just don't think it's done.
I guess that's
and
I
think
fair.
The big thing is it doesn't commit in any.
But in all of my
directions,
experience with that approach, which again is board games, which it's not like board games have a plot, but it's always just like, hey, that's a cool drawing. Oh yeah, the Norse gods, but there's like robots. Neat. But outside of that, like, I just haven't seen anything really expand on that in an interesting way, for the similar reasons that we've kind of talked about, where I think, at least for me, mythology has this, especially I feel like Norse is a bit more medieval fantasy-ish. I say medieval, but I don't think like Vikings were medieval, but it's, you know, swords and sandals, I guess. So the technology feels a little more out of place, whereas I can kind of let some of that technology go in some other mythologies that maybe don't feel as constrained to that. But I also don't... Norse isn't my favorite mythology anyways, so... Who cares?
My first put up, like I said, I defend this movie. I do not love this movie. I have a lot of negative things about it, but I do not think it deserves the hate it gets, at least not to the degree it gets. But my put ups are very loose. My first put up is, I liked how Curse looked. It's nothing special, but I just thought like his weird like monster design, and I usually hate like human eyes under a mask like that, but it worked for me. It just made him look...
I didn't care for him.
Weirdly unsettling in a way that I liked. My other put up, I don't really remember what it was. My other put up is I also like the idea of the final fight. Like, I like falling through portals and jumping between worlds, and like you said, the hammer being kind of displaced in a way that made it significant that it wasn't just like returning to him immediately. I like all that kind of stuff. It goes on too long, and
it doesn't really
not
accomplish
incredibly
anything.
Interesting.
It's just things happening at that point.
Yeah, but I mean, it is still a fun idea, and to that, I give it credit. My put down is also all the space bullshit. Like, all that sci-fi crap. Like, you can make that work, and I mean, without saying too much, the third movie makes that work, but it's because it picks a side and it leans into it. And honestly, in a way, it picks both sides and leans into it. But it does it in a way where I know where it stood. Whereas in this, it feels like it thinks the magic stuff is stupid and it has to justify itself.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas by the third movie, it just kind of goes like, we're everything, and you just you're either on board or you're not. And I think, honestly, that's the way to do it, because I was on board. I was just like, yeah, do it. We're going to do space stuff. We're going to do magic stuff. I don't fucking care. And I mean, this is not the last Marvel movie that's going to do this. There is one coming up that I think in many ways is even worse, because it really doesn't want to commit. It wants to still ground itself in this weird sci-fi area that it doesn't fit in. And it's a shame. So where do you put this in your rankings of every movie ever? For mine, it is, I guess we're at 8 movies.
Every movie ever? Oof.
Every Marvel movie.
Every Marvel movie ever.
Mine is currently where it's at right now, tied for middle, I guess, in 4th place under Iron Man, above Iron Man 3, 2, first Thor, and Incredible Hulk.
I got last movie I watched, last movie in the list.
And since we didn't do it last time, and now you can see where we're now that we're caught up in real time to where we were with last week. Where do you put the Snyder Cut in your ranking of every Marvel movie ever?
Oh, I have to do that now? Okay.
We're going to.
It was long. You know, I'm gonna throw it dead in the middle. I think I liked Captain America better, and I think I hated Incredible Hulk more. It was a movie I watched.
I find it very interesting how different everything is. Mine is dead in the middle. Thor: The Dark World is now dead in the middle. I put Snyder Cut right above it. I thought the Snyder Cut is long, but I think it is, as much as I hate to say it, competent, fine.
It didn't do anything, like, there was a couple boring things in it, but it didn't do anything. Like, I thought Thor: The Dark World was boring and stupid. I didn't think that about Zack Snyder's Justice League.
So I put Snyder Cut above Thor, underneath Iron Man, Avengers, and Captain America: The First Avenger, the best movie we've seen yet.
Thanks for hanging out with us. If you like this, tell a friend. If you didn't, then lie to a friend. Check us out on Twitter at SoHowAbout. You can find me on Twitter at SethKumpf. You can find Andrew on Twitter at TessuDownist. And subscribe to us on YouTube at SoHowAbout.
And join us next time when we do this once more with Interference.
Watcher. Boop. Boop.
Okay, now that the mics are off, what are we watching next?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Andrew. We're going to be watching Captain America, The Winter Soldier. Well, we're going to be watching Captain America, The Spring Soldier, because it's spring, not winter.
Old Man Spring.
Never mind, that works. I was going to say that didn't work until you sang Old Man Spring.
I could have kept going.
That's what won me over. That's the part where it's like, if we had scripted it, stupid. Having it just happen.
And then I'll
hysterical.
sing Old Man Winter, but change it to spring since it's now winter. That's fucking stupid, dude. Don't say that.